Blood is thicker than lies. The call came at 3 a.m. on a Thursday night. Simone Johnson had been asleep for only 2 hours after a long day at work. She was the vice president of operations at Riverside Healthcare, one of the largest medical companies in the southeastern United States. She had worked there for 20 years, climbing the ladder from entry-level administrative assistant to one of the most respected executives in the organization. She had earned that respect through dedication, intelligence, and an unwavering commitment to excellence. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. She knew before answering that something was terribly wrong. No good news came at 3 in the morning. Only crisis, only tragedy, only the kind of moments that shattered lives and changed everything. She picked up the phone with a trembling hand. "Mrs. Johnson, this is Officer Williams from the Metro Police Department. I'm calling regarding your son, Deshaun Johnson, Jr." Simone's heart stopped. Her son, her baby, her entire reason for living. What happened? Is he hurt? Is he in an accident? "Your son has been arrested." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Arrested. Her son. The words didn't compute. Simone tried to make sense of them, but her brain refused to process the information. "There must be a mistake," she said. "What are you talking about? My son is a good boy. He works in technology. He goes to church. He would never—" "Mrs. Johnson, your son has been charged with drug possession, with intent to distribute. We found 200 grams of methamphetamine in his vehicle during a traffic stop tonight. He's currently being held at the Metro Police Precinct downtown." Simone felt the room spin. 200 grams. That was serious. That was federal charges. That was prison time measured in decades, not months. "That's impossible," she said. "Officer, there has to be a mistake. My son does not use drugs. He does not sell drugs. I know my son. This is not him." "Ma'am, we found the drugs in his vehicle. We found them during a lawful traffic stop. We have them secured as evidence." "I want to speak to my son," Simone said. "I want to speak to him right now." "You can come to the precinct to meet with him, but he will need to be booked first. That process takes approximately 2 hours." Simone was out of bed before the officer finished speaking. She threw on clothes. She grabbed her purse. She was in her car within 5 minutes, driving downtown through empty streets at speeds that would have gotten her arrested under any other circumstance. The Metro Police Precinct was a concrete building that looked like a fortress. Gray walls, thick doors, the kind of place where lives were dismantled and futures were destroyed. She walked in and found herself in a waiting area. An officer behind a desk looked at her with the kind of detached sympathy that came from seeing the same desperation play out 100 times a day. "I'm here to see my son," she said. "Deshaun Johnson, Jr., he was just brought in." The officer checked a computer. "He's still being processed. You can wait over there. Someone will call your name when he's ready for visitation." Simone sat in a plastic chair for what felt like an eternity, but was actually 40 minutes. She replayed the phone call in her mind. She tried to think of any possibility that this could be real. Could her son have gotten involved with drugs? Could he be dealing? Could there be something in his life that she didn't know about? No. She knew her son. She had raised him alone after his father abandoned them when Deshaun Jr. was 3 years old. She had been both mother and father to him. She had worked 2 jobs when he was growing up. She had sacrificed everything for him. She knew him better than she knew herself. This was not her son. This was a mistake. A terrible, catastrophic mistake. An officer appeared and led her to an interrogation room. When she saw her son, her heart broke. Deshaun Jr. was 23 years old. He was tall and handsome and smart. He had graduated from college with honors and gotten a job at one of the most prestigious tech companies in the country. He was dating a wonderful woman named Alicia. They were talking about marriage. They were talking about children. They were talking about a future. Now he sat across from her in an interrogation room, his eyes red from crying, his entire body shaking with fear and confusion. "Mom," he said, and his voice broke. "Mom, I swear to God, I swear on everything. I don't know how those drugs got in my car. I don't use drugs. I don't sell drugs. Someone put them there. I know how this looks, but it wasn't me." Simone believed him instantly, not because she was his mother and mothers were biased, but because she knew her son. She knew the core of who he was, and that core had been built on integrity. "We're going to figure this out," she said, taking his hands across the table. "We're going to hire the best attorney money can buy. We're going to prove your innocence. I promise you, son, I will not rest until your name is cleared." Simone hired an attorney named Keisha Williams before the sun came up. Keisha was a powerhouse. She was in her mid-50s with a reputation as one of the most aggressive criminal defense attorneys in the state. She had graduated from Howard University Law School. She had worked for a major firm before opening her own practice. She had successfully defended clients in cases that seemed impossible. Her office was on the 35th floor of a downtown high-rise. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the entire city. On those windows, you could see the lives of thousands of people going about their days, unaware that their own justice system could destroy them at any moment. Simone sat across from Keisha and told her the entire story. "My son is innocent," Simone said. "I know that sounds like what every parent says. I know that sounds naive, but I know my son. He did not plant drugs in his car. He did not intend to distribute anything. This is a setup. I don't know why. I don't know who would do this, but I know my son is innocent." Keisha listened without interrupting. She took notes. She asked questions. She pulled up the police report on her computer and began reading through it carefully. After 30 minutes, she looked up. "The police say they conducted a lawful traffic stop," Keisha said. "They say they found the drugs in your son's vehicle during a search conducted with his consent. That's the story they're telling. If we can prove that the search was unlawful or that the consent was coerced, we might be able to get the evidence suppressed." "Can you do that?" Simone asked. "Possibly, but there's another angle that might be more promising. There's something in this police report that doesn't add up." Keisha turned her computer screen towards Simone. The officer who conducted the traffic stop was Officer Daniel Martinez, but the evidence was logged by Sergeant Marcus Blake, and the chain of custody shows that the evidence was transferred between 4 different officers before it was logged. She pointed at the timeline on the screen. That many transfers in that short a period of time is unusual. It leaves room for contamination. It leaves room for tampering. It leaves room for someone to have switched the evidence entirely. Simone felt a spark of hope. "Are you saying someone could have planted the drugs?" "I'm saying it's possible. And if someone did plant them, then I need to figure out who, and more importantly, why." Keisha pulled out a contract. "My fee is $50,000 for the initial investigation and trial preparation. If this goes to a jury trial, my fee will increase to $150,000. If this goes to a federal trial, my fee will be $250,000. Simone looked at the numbers and felt a moment of panic. She had savings. She had retirement accounts. But this was going to devastate her financially. She signed the contract anyway. "Find out who did this," she said. "Find out why they did this, and get my son's name cleared." Keisha began her investigation the next day. She interviewed Deshaun Jr. extensively. She asked him about his relationships, his work, his financial situation, his habits, his friends, his enemies. Deshaun Jr. told her about his job at Tech Vision, a company that develops software for healthcare companies. He told her about his girlfriend, Alicia. He told her about his church. He told her about his family. He told her about his dreams of starting his own company someday. And then, when Keisha asked him about whether anyone had approached him about anything illegal, Deshaun Jr. hesitated. "There is someone," he said, "but I didn't think it was serious. I thought it was just talk." "Who?" Keisha asked. "Brandon Mitchell." Keisha's pen stopped moving across her notepad. "Tell me about Brandon Mitchell." Deshaun Jr. took a deep breath. Brandon and I grew up together. Our mothers are best friends. We were like brothers. But Brandon got involved with the wrong crowd about 10 years ago. He dropped out of college and started dealing drugs. He became pretty serious about it. He's a major dealer in the city now. Everyone knows who he is. And he approached you about what? About using my job. He said that his organization moves money through various channels. He said they need someone on the inside at a major company to help move money electronically. He said he would pay me $50,000 a month to help him. Keisha leaned forward. What did you tell him? I told him no. I told him I wanted nothing to do with his business. I told him that I respected our friendship, but I wasn't going to be part of something that would hurt people. When did this happen? About a year ago, maybe a little more than that. And he kept asking. He would text me. He would call me. He would say things like, I'm just asking you to move some money. Nobody gets hurt. You make $50,000 a month. Think about it. And you kept refusing? I kept refusing. I told him multiple times. I told him that I would never change my mind. I told him that I valued our friendship, but not enough to compromise my integrity. Keisha sat back in her chair. I think Brandon Mitchell planted those drugs in your car, she said. Deshaun Jr.'s face went pale. Why would he do that? Why would he try to destroy me? Because you refused to do what he wanted, Keisha said. And in the criminal world, when someone refuses you, you make them understand there are consequences. You make them understand that cooperation is not optional. She pulled out her phone and called her investigator, a former police detective named Raymond Powell. I need surveillance footage from the past month, she said. Specifically, I need video of a man named Brandon Mitchell coming into contact with a vehicle. The vehicle belongs to Deshaun Johnson, Jr. I need to know when he accessed that car. I need to know what he did. I need to know everything. Raymond Powell was good at his job. Very good. Within 2 weeks, he had found exactly what they were looking for. There was a gym that Deshaun Jr. attended regularly, 3 times a week. Raymond pulled security footage from the gym for the 2 weeks before Deshaun Jr.'s arrest. And on the footage, there was Brandon Mitchell, not going to the gym, but hanging around in the parking lot. On the day before the arrest, the footage showed Brandon Mitchell approaching Deshaun Jr.'s car during the time when Deshaun Jr. was inside the gym. The footage showed Brandon opening the car door. The footage showed him placing something in the vehicle. The footage was grainy, but it was clear enough to see what was happening. Brandon had planted the drugs. Keisha called Simone immediately. We have proof, she said. We have video evidence that Brandon Mitchell planted the drugs in your son's car. We have everything we need to prove that your son is innocent. Simone felt tears streaming down her face. What do we do now? She asked. Now we go to the district attorney, Keisha said. Now we force them to drop the charges. Now we destroy the person who did this. But Keisha paused before hanging up. Simone, there's something else you should know. Brandon Mitchell isn't just a small-time dealer. According to my sources, he's one of the largest drug traffickers in this region. He moves millions of dollars a year. He has people in law enforcement on his payroll. He's dangerous, very dangerous. What are you saying? Simone asked. I'm saying that going after Brandon Mitchell is not going to be simple, and it's not going to be safe. Are you sure you want to do this? Simone thought about her son. She thought about the fear in his eyes when she visited him in that interrogation room. She thought about the injustice of being framed for a crime you didn't commit. She thought about the fact that if Brandon could do this to Deshaun Jr., he could do it to someone else. I want to destroy him, Simone said quietly. I want to burn down everything he built. Simone had a secret that very few people knew about. For the past 5 years, she'd been cooperating with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Her job as vice president of operations at Riverside Healthcare gave her access to information about large financial transactions. She noticed suspicious patterns, large transfers from healthcare companies to accounts that didn't match any legitimate business purposes. Money being moved through their systems that seemed disconnected from any real service. She had reported these suspicions to a former FBI agent who was now working in the private sector. That agent had put her in touch with Special Agent Robert Taylor from the FBI's Organized Crime Task Force. Agent Taylor had explained that the money Simone was seeing was likely connected to major drug trafficking operations. The criminals were using legitimate companies to launder their drug money. They were using the healthcare system to move billions of dollars. Simone had agreed to help the FBI. She had been trained on how to identify suspicious transactions. She had been trained on how to document evidence. She had been trained on how to be careful and how to stay safe. For 5 years, she'd been providing information to Agent Taylor about financial transactions that she suspected were connected to drug operations. And Brandon Mitchell's operation was one of them. In fact, Brandon Mitchell had been on the FBI's radar for 3 years. They had been building a case against him. They had been documenting his organization. They had been preparing for a takedown. But they needed more evidence. They needed someone on the inside. They needed someone who could testify about what they had seen. Now Simone had the perfect opportunity to do exactly that. She called Agent Taylor. "I need to meet with you," she said. "It's urgent." They met at a coffee shop downtown. It was a public place. It was crowded. It was the kind of location where meeting with an FBI agent wouldn't raise suspicion. Simone told Agent Taylor everything. She told him about Deshaun Jr.'s arrest. She told him about Brandon Mitchell planting the drugs. She told him about the surveillance footage. She told him about Brandon's attempt to force her son into a criminal conspiracy. Agent Taylor listened carefully. "We've been investigating Brandon Mitchell for 3 years," he said. "We know he's involved in a multi-million-dollar drug operation. We know he's bribing police officers. We know he's laundering money through legitimate businesses. But we've been struggling to build a case that will stick." "What do you need?" Simone asked. "We need someone to testify against him. We need someone who can document his operations. We need someone who can prove that he's committed serious federal crimes." Simone thought about this for a moment. "What if I could get him to confess?" she asked. Agent Taylor leaned back in his chair. "How would you do that?" "I could call him. I could tell him that I know what he did to my son. I could tell him that I'm considering going to the police. I could meet with him and record the conversation. I could get him to admit to everything." Agent Taylor was quiet for a long moment. "That's dangerous, Simone. If Brandon realizes what you're doing, he could hurt you. He could hurt your son. He could disappear and we'd lose him." "He won't realize," Simone said, "because he's arrogant. He thinks he's smarter than everyone else. He thinks he's untouchable, and he underestimates women, especially older women. He thinks we're weak. I can use that against him." Agent Taylor nodded slowly. "Okay," he said, "but we do this right. I'm going to get you a federal wire. You're going to wear it when you meet with Brandon. Everything he says will be recorded. It will be admissible in court, and once we have his confession, we'll arrest him before he knows what's happening." The federal wire was delivered to Simone's house 3 days later. It was smaller than she expected, a tiny device that she could hide under her clothing. It was connected to a receiver that Agent Taylor would carry in a nearby location. Everything would be recorded digitally. Everything would be preserved as evidence. Simone practiced wearing the wire. She practiced moving without disturbing it. She practiced speaking naturally while knowing that every word she said was being recorded. Then she called Brandon Mitchell. "I need to talk to you," she said, "in person, about Deshaun." Brandon's voice on the phone was casual, confident, like he had nothing to fear. "Sure, Ma, I'll meet you. How about the park near your house? Sunday afternoon?" "Sunday afternoon is fine," Simone said, 3 p.m. "I'll see you then," Brandon said, and he hung up. Simone hung up the phone and took a deep breath. She had less than 4 days to prepare herself for what might be the most important conversation of her life. Sunday afternoon arrived with blue skies and mild weather. The park was crowded with families. Children played on the grass. People jogged on the paths. An old couple sat on a bench, feeding bread to pigeons. It was the last place you would expect a criminal confession to take place. Simone sat on a bench near the playground, wearing the federal wire hidden beneath her clothing. Agent Taylor was nearby in an unmarked van, monitoring the recording. 2 FBI agents were positioned at different locations throughout the park, watching to make sure nothing went wrong. Brandon arrived at exactly 3 p.m. He was dressed in expensive clothing, Gucci sneakers, a designer t-shirt, a gold chain around his neck. He moved with the confidence of a man who believed himself to be invincible. He sat down next to Simone. "Hey, Ma, how you been?" "I've been better," Simone said. Her voice was steady. "Brandon, I need to talk to you about something serious." "What's up?" "I know what you did to my son." Brandon's expression didn't change. He smiled slightly, as if Simone had just told him a funny joke. "I don't know what you're talking about." "You planted drugs in Deshawn's car," Simone said. Her words were clear, direct, impossible to misunderstand. "You got him arrested. You tried to frame him for a crime he didn't commit." Brandon turned to look at her. His smile disappeared. "Be careful, Simone," he said quietly. "Be very careful about what you're accusing me of." "I know you did it," Simone continued. "I have video footage. I have surveillance from the gym. I have proof that you accessed his vehicle and planted the methamphetamine." Brandon stood up abruptly. "This conversation is over," he said. "No," Simone said. She reached out and grabbed his arm. "Sit down and talk to me like a man. Tell me why you did it. Tell me why you would betray a kid you've known his whole life." Brandon looked around the park, seeing only families and children and normal people. He sat back down. "Your son made a mistake," he said quietly. "He had an opportunity, a good opportunity. I offered him money, serious money, and he refused me." "So you framed him," Simone said. "I taught him a lesson," Brandon said. "I taught him that there are consequences for disrespecting me. I taught him that when Brandon Mitchell offers you an opportunity, you don't say no." "You tried to send an innocent young man to prison," Simone said. Her voice was shaking with anger. "You destroyed his future. You destroyed his life." "His life isn't destroyed," Brandon said. "His life is just beginning. Now he understands that I'm serious. Now he understands that he needs to cooperate with me." "And if he doesn't?" Simone asked. Brandon leaned in close. His voice became cold and dangerous. "Then I have enough information to bury him forever. I know things about people he knows. I know things about the people he works with. I can flip this entire situation. I can make him look like the criminal, and there's nothing he can do about it." He stood up again. "Your son needs to understand that he's in a game he can't win. He's in a game where I make the rules. He's in a game where the only winning move is to play along." He started to walk away, then turned back. "Tell him to think about my offer, Simone. Tell him that if he decides to cooperate, everything will be fine. But if he doesn't?" He left the threat unfinished, but the meaning was clear. Then he walked away across the park, disappearing into the crowd of families and children. Simone sat on the bench and trembled. The wire had recorded everything. Every word, every threat, every admission, every piece of evidence that the FBI needed to take Brandon Mitchell down. Agent Taylor called Simone at home 2 hours later. "We have everything," he said. "We have a clear confession. We have threats. We have admissions of planting evidence. We have admissions of organizing a criminal conspiracy. We have enough to prosecute him for multiple federal crimes." "What happens now?" Simone asked. "Now we execute a search warrant on his residence, his business, and any properties he owns. We'll find drugs. We'll find money. We'll find evidence of money laundering. We'll find everything we need." When? Tomorrow morning, 6 a.m. We're going to hit him fast and hard before he has time to move anything or cover his tracks. Simone hung up the phone and felt a strange mixture of emotions: relief, fear, anger, satisfaction. She had done it. She had recorded a confession from one of the most dangerous criminals in the city. She had put herself at risk. She had worn a federal wire into a public park and sat down across from a man she had known most of her life and gotten him to confess to everything. Now his empire was going to come crashing down. The morning of the search warrant, Simone turned on the news and watched as FBI agents and local law enforcement surrounded Brandon Mitchell's mansion. The house was massive, 8 bedrooms, in a gated community, a perfect symbol of wealth built on the suffering of others. Law enforcement entered the house at 6 a.m. with a battering ram and military-style tactical gear. The news coverage showed Brandon being led out of his house in handcuffs. He was screaming. He was cursing. He was yelling that this was all a mistake. He was yelling that he was being set up, but nobody was listening. The search warrant resulted in seizures of cocaine, methamphetamine, fentanyl, and heroin. Approximately $8 million in cash. Ledgers documenting his entire drug operation, names of police officers on his payroll, names of judges he had connections with, weapons, equipment for manufacturing and distributing drugs, everything. By the end of the day, Brandon Mitchell had been arrested on 47 separate federal charges. The U.S. Attorney announced that they would be prosecuting Brandon Mitchell on charges including conspiracy to distribute controlled substances, money laundering, mail fraud, wire fraud, bribery of public officials, and attempted extortion. The trial was scheduled for 6 months later. During those 6 months, all of the charges against Deshaun Jr. were dropped. His arrest record was expunged. His name was cleared. The prosecutor announced that Deshaun Jr. was not and had never been a suspect in their investigation. He was the victim of a planted evidence scheme orchestrated by criminal defendants. Deshaun Jr. returned to his job at Tech Vision. His company gave him a promotion. His girlfriend Alicia was waiting for him, and they began planning their wedding. Life began to return to normal for Deshaun Jr., but for Brandon Mitchell, everything was collapsing. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Simone was the prosecution's star witness. She took the stand and calmly explained how Brandon had approached her son, how he had threatened him, how she had worn a federal wire, how he had confessed to planting the drugs. Brandon's attorney tried to discredit her. He suggested that she was lying. He suggested that she had been coaching her son to make false accusations. He suggested that she was exaggerating. But the recording spoke for itself. The jury heard Brandon's voice clear as day, admitting to planting the drugs, admitting to trying to extort Deshaun Jr., admitting to running a massive drug operation, admitting to bribing police officers. There was no ambiguity. There was no room for doubt. There was only the truth, captured on audio, impossible to deny. The jury deliberated for 4 days. On the 4th day, they returned a verdict: guilty on all 47 counts. The courtroom erupted. Brandon screamed that it was a setup. His attorney requested an appeal. His family cried. But the verdict was clear. Brandon Mitchell was a federal prisoner now. 2 weeks later, the federal judge sentenced Brandon Mitchell. Judge Margaret Chen sat on the bench, looking down at Brandon Mitchell, who stood in an orange prison jumpsuit, his hands and feet shackled. "Brandon Mitchell, you have been found guilty of some of the most serious crimes this court has encountered," Judge Chen said. "You have organized a criminal enterprise that brought poison into this community. You have corrupted law enforcement officers who were sworn to uphold the law. You have destroyed lives. You have terrorized innocent people. And when an innocent young man refused to become part of your organization, you attempted to destroy him through false criminal charges." She paused. It is the judgment of this court that you be sentenced to 53 years in federal prison. You will be eligible for parole after serving 30 years. You are also sentenced to pay restitution in the amount of $5 million to victims of your criminal enterprise." Brandon fell to his knees, screaming. He was led away by U.S. Marshals, his cries echoing through the courtroom. At 29 years old, Brandon Mitchell was now a federal prisoner who would likely spend the rest of his life in prison. The domino effect was immediate and dramatic. With Brandon Mitchell gone, his entire organization collapsed. His lieutenants were arrested, his suppliers were arrested, his customers were identified. His network unraveled like a sweater with a pulled thread. Law enforcement arrested 97 people as a direct result of the federal investigation that started with Simone wearing a wire. The drug problem in the city didn't disappear, but it diminished significantly. Neighborhoods that had been controlled by Brandon's operation were reclaimed. Residents could let their children play outside again. Businesses could operate without paying protection money. One woman's decision to fight for her son had changed the entire landscape of her city. Simone's role in bringing down Brandon Mitchell became public knowledge. Local news outlets covered the story. National news outlets picked it up. Simone Johnson became a symbol of a mother's love and a citizen's courage. She was invited to speak at universities about standing up to corruption. She was invited to speak at churches about faith and perseverance. She was invited to speak at law enforcement conferences about the importance of community cooperation. But she wasn't interested in fame or recognition. She was interested in helping other families. She used her settlement money, the restitution that had been ordered by the court, to found an organization called The Innocent Ones. The organization was dedicated to helping families whose loved ones had been falsely accused of crimes. It provided free legal consultation to those who couldn't afford attorneys. It provided support groups. It provided resources. It provided hope. Within 5 years, the Innocent Ones had helped exonerate 15 people who were serving prison sentences for crimes they didn't commit. Within 10 years, that number had grown to 23. 23 lives restored because Simone Johnson refused to accept injustice. Deshaun Jr. married Alicia 1 year after his arrest was dropped. It was a beautiful wedding, held at their church, with hundreds of guests. Simone walked her son down the aisle. She cried happy tears as she watched him say vows to a woman he loved. He had a son 1 year later. They named him Marcus, after the investigator who had helped prove Deshaun Jr.'s innocence. Deshaun Jr. thrived in his career at TechVision. He was promoted to senior developer, then to director of engineering, then to chief technology officer. But his real passion was something else. He became obsessed with technology that could help identify wrongful convictions. He studied the cases of people who had been exonerated. He looked at what evidence had been missed, what connections had been overlooked, what technology could have prevented their false convictions. With seed funding from his own savings and from foundations dedicated to criminal justice reform, Deshaun Jr. developed software called Simone's Truth. The software analyzed evidence from criminal cases. It identified inconsistencies. It flagged suspicious patterns. It helped defense attorneys build stronger cases. It was designed to prevent the kind of injustice that had almost destroyed Deshaun Jr.'s life. Within 5 years of its launch, Simone's Truth had been used in the defense of 84 cases. 84 people freed from prison for crimes they didn't commit. 84 lives restored because Deshaun Jr. took his pain and transformed it into purpose. Simone's best friend, Brandon's mother, never spoke to Simone again. She cut off all contact. She told mutual friends that Simone had betrayed her son, that Simone had conspired with the government to destroy him. Simone felt the loss of that friendship acutely. She had known Brandon's mother for 35 years. They had raised their sons together. They had been there for each other through divorces and illnesses and losses. They had been sisters in everything but blood. But she also understood that sometimes standing up for what's right comes at a terrible cost. Sometimes justice and friendship cannot coexist, and Simone chose justice. She made peace with that decision, not because it was easy, but because it was right. 20 years after Brandon's arrest, Simone received a letter from federal prison. It arrived at her office, forwarded through proper legal channels. The envelope was plain white. The return address said, Federal Penitentiary, Atlanta, inmate Damager 84956. Brandon Mitchell. Simone held the letter for a long time before opening it. She didn't know what she would find inside. An apology, a threat, a demand for revenge. She opened it carefully. Dear Simone, I have spent 20 years in this cell thinking about what I did. I have had a lot of time to think, too much time. And I've come to understand some things that I didn't understand when I was young. I was angry when you turned me in. I hated you. I spent years thinking about all the ways I would hurt you if I ever got the chance to get out. I imagined revenge. I imagined making you suffer the way I believed you had made me suffer. But I'm 49 years old now. I have been in prison for 20 years. I will spend at least another 10 years here. Maybe I will die here. And I have finally come to understand something. You didn't destroy me. My own choices destroyed me. I chose to sell drugs. I chose to bribe police officers. I chose to run an organization that destroyed thousands of lives. I chose to frame an innocent young man because he wouldn't help me commit more crimes. You didn't make those choices. I did. And when you decided to stop me, you did the right thing. I know I have no right to ask for forgiveness. I don't deserve forgiveness. I have hurt too many people. I have destroyed too many lives. I caused so much suffering. But I want you to know that somewhere in this prison cell, a man who was once your friend's son has come to understand that what he did was wrong, unforgivably wrong. And he understands that you were right to stop him. Your son is innocent. He always was. And I stole years of his life that he can never get back. I put fear in his heart that will never completely go away, and I did it for no reason other than my own arrogance. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for what I did to Deshawn. I'm sorry for what I did to your family. I'm sorry for the years I spent destroying this city. I'm sorry for the lives I ruined. I don't expect you to accept my apology. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I needed you to know that I understand now. I understand what I did, and I understand that you were right. Respectfully, Brandon Mitchell, federal inmate, 84956. Simone read the letter 3 times. She didn't cry. She didn't feel angry. She didn't feel vindicated. She just felt sad. Sad for the talented young man that Brandon Mitchell could have been. Sad for the life he could have built. Sad for the people he could have helped instead of destroyed. She folded the letter carefully and placed it in an envelope. Then she sat down and wrote a response. Dear Brandon, I received your letter. I read it carefully, and I want you to know that I believe you when you say that you understand what you did. Understanding is not forgiveness, but it is something. I did not turn you in out of revenge. I turned you in because you tried to destroy my son, because you tried to sentence an innocent young man to prison, because you believed you were above the law and above consequence. I turned you in because that was the right thing to do. You are correct that your choices destroyed you, not my choices, your choices. You chose to enter the criminal world. You chose to sell poison. You chose to destroy lives. You chose to frame an innocent young man. Every decision that led you to that prison cell was a choice that you made. I do not forgive you. I cannot forgive you. What you did was unforgivable. But I want you to know that your suffering was not meaningless. Your conviction sent a message to every criminal in this city that they are not untouchable. Your conviction rescued 97 criminals from the streets. Your conviction freed neighborhoods from the grip of terror. Your suffering prevented future suffering. and that will be your legacy. Not the man who tried to destroy an innocent young man, but the man whose downfall prevented the destruction of countless others. That is small consolation, I know, but it is something. I hope you use the rest of your life in prison to continue to understand what you did. I hope you spend your days thinking about the lives you destroyed and the choices you made. I hope you come to accept that you deserve to be where you are. And I hope that somehow, somewhere, the young man you tried to destroy knows that his mother stood up for him, that his mother refused to accept injustice, that his mother fought for him with every ounce of strength she possessed. That is what matters to me. Not your redemption, not your understanding, but the fact that my son is free, that his name is cleared, that he has built a life of meaning and purpose. He is proof that truth wins, that justice wins, that standing up for what's right, even when it costs everything, is worth it. Sincerely, Simone Johnson. Simone never heard from Brandon again. She didn't know if he read her letter. She didn't know if it changed anything for him. She didn't care. She had said what she needed to say. She had made it clear that she did not regret her actions. She had made it clear that justice was more important to her than friendship, more important to her than comfort, more important to her than anything else. And she had moved on with her life. 30 years after Brandon's arrest, Simone stood on the stage of the annual Exonerees Gala. She was now in her 70s, but she still moved with the strength and dignity of a woman who had fought for what was right. Next to her stood her son, Deshaun Jr., and his wife, Alicia, and their 3 children, and their grandchildren. Deshaun Jr. had been invited to speak at the gala because Simone's Truth, the software that he had developed, had been used in 84 exonerations over the past 20 years. 84 people freed from prison because a son took his mother's strength and transformed it into technology that would prevent the kind of injustice that had almost destroyed his own life. "My mother saved my life," Deshaun Jr. said, his voice strong and steady. "Not because she gave me birth, but because she refused to accept a lie about who I was. She fought for me when the entire justice system was telling her that her son was a criminal. She wore a wire into a dangerous situation and recorded a confession that proved my innocence." He paused, looking at his mother. "Everything I have, everything I am, I owe to a woman who decided that justice was worth more than comfort, that truth was worth more than silence, that her son was worth fighting for, even when the odds were impossible." He looked out at the audience of 2,000 people. There are 84 people in this room who are only free because my mother refused to accept injustice. There are 84 families who are only whole because my mother stood up when it would have been easier to sit down. His voice cracked with emotion. And there are countless others who will never know my mother's name, but whose lives will be changed because of the work that I have been able to do. Because I have been able to translate my mother's strength into technology that prevents false convictions. He walked to his mother and hugged her. The crowd stood and applauded. Many were crying. Simone stood and hugged her son back. She had lost a friendship. She had faced threats. She had put herself in danger. She had spent money that she couldn't afford to spend. She had sacrificed her comfort and her security. But she had saved her son. And in saving her son, she had saved countless others. That was enough. That was more than enough. That was everything. The moral of this story is profound and simple. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply tell the truth. Sometimes the greatest victory is not the one where you destroy your enemy, but the one where you protect the people you love. Sometimes standing up for what's right means losing something precious. It means losing a friendship. It means losing comfort. It means losing the easy path, but it also means saving your child. It means changing your city. It means creating a legacy that will outlive you. It means preventing future suffering. Simone Johnson was not a vigilante. She was not a villain seeking revenge. She was a mother fighting for her son. She was a citizen standing up to injustice. She was a woman who understood that some things are worth more than comfort or friendship or safety. She was a hero. Not the kind of hero you read about in comic books, not the kind of hero who uses violence or revenge or cruelty, but the kind of hero that the world desperately needs. The kind of hero who stands up when it would be easier to sit down. The kind of hero who tells the truth when it would be easier to lie. The kind of hero who refuses to accept injustice, no matter the cost. Simone Johnson understood that sometimes love means fighting. Sometimes it means sacrifice. Sometimes it means choosing justice over everything else. And that understanding changed the world. Not the entire world, but the world of her family, the world of her community, the world of 84 people who were wrongfully imprisoned and now walk free. For those people, Simone Johnson's decision to fight was the difference between a life destroyed and a life restored. Because mothers fight, because truth matters, because sometimes justice is the only revenge that's worth pursuing, because one woman's decision to stand up can change everything,